We're going to focus in on the severe season in this edition of Market Meteorology. We're going to dive deeper into the weather and how it impacts the economy. We're focusing, of course, on that severe weather outbreak in March and even the flooding that we saw in early April. Severe storms are hurting the pockets of everyday people, some who aren't usually conditioned to the severe weather in their area. I'm actually joined now by Fox Business Contributor Phil Flynn. And Phil, a lot of rural communities, right, are hit by these severe storms in that outbreak in March. How can these communities be limited with the resources, expect that recovery financially, if they may not have coverage for an event like this?
It's almost impossible. And you know, what really concerns me when we look at where these storms have been moving, Steve, as you know, a lot of these people haven't seen this before. They're underinsured. You know, when we look at the amount of damage, it's estimated, just in the month of March to be about $6.25 billion. But what is really concerning about that, the insurance or the insured part of that is only half of that. So that means that there's $3 billion in damages that's going to fall on the backs of families. That's going to put a lot of pressure on them. And to rebuild, it makes it so much more difficult, especially when you're not prepared. You haven't seen this type of weather outbreak before. You're either underinsured or have no insurance. And just the logistical issues of rebuilding, it just becomes astronomical.
And Phil, I mean, without a weather event like this, housing in and of itself, it's been a struggle for affordable housing all around the country. And then you take an event like this where you have low-income families that are just struggling for day-to-day needs, and then they have this disaster. How does this push them almost over the top? How do you get out of that and able to get back on your feet?
You know, fearful, the people that probably need the insurance the worst are the ones that are underinsured, right? You know, when you look at manufactured homes, for example, you know, a lot of these homes are where the poor go or the lower income people go, and they're the most vulnerable to a storm, right? Some of the older units, you can't even get insurance. They won't sell it to you, or you have to really reinforce these homes. And even the newer units, you know, pay a higher price. And when you have this type of events, insurance companies look at risk, you know, versus profit potential. And where there's more risk, they're going to step away, and where there's more profit potential, they're going to stay.
Yeah, we've talked about that, you and I, insurance deserts right now, because they don't want to have to deal with the potential fallout. I want to ask you, though, because we have talked about how expansive this is. You have to prepare for everything nowadays. For people that aren't used to this and they're facing, a natural disaster and they need to document that, what tips do you have to make sure they get the most out of their insurance coverage?
Well, there's a reason why there's a camera on your iPhone, right? Document, document, document. Take pictures. You know, the more documentation you have, the more apt the insurance companies are going to, deal with you a lot efficiently. You know, a lot of mistakes people will say the insurance adjuster will come out. You know, he assumes he does the whole job. Don't. Protect yourself. Let the insurance company know that you have that, so when it comes time to write that check to you, you have everything covered.
Phil, I want to ask you about this event, right? Tornadoes, we've been stuck in this pattern of such violent tornadoes over the last several weeks. How does funding, though, for damage because of tornadoes versus hurricanes differ, right? It seems like tornadoes, there's not the same type of funding, and that creates an extra sting to those communities that need it the most.
You know, you're absolutely right. When you get a hurricane, it's usually a dramatic event. You know, it can hit many communities. It can be very widespread. You know, so often with tornadoes, they hit an area, and then they can pass over an area. So there's not as much focus nationally, right? But I think when people watch the Fox Business Network and they see what's happening this month, I think they should contact their legislators and say, hey, get a little help for the tornado alleys of this country. You know, it's the breadbasket of America. This is where we grow the food. This is where we start small businesses. And we're going to need some help. And they're going to probably need some help with what happened this month or last month.
Yeah, and Phil, let's shift our focus, because the same areas that got hit by storms, they also get rain with every round, whether it was severe or sub-severe. And when we think about Kentucky, I mean, in early April, historic flooding. Something that no one was prepared for. I mean, you see these visuals, thousands of people displaced from their homes. They lost everything. And we actually have an article. I want everybody to see this from Reinsurance News. It reads, Aon stated, given initial assessments conducted across the affected areas, total economic and insured losses will likely reach into the hundreds of millions of dollars. Now, Louisville suffered damage, but it could have been worse if the city was not prepared. I actually spoke with the mayor, that was Craig Greenberg, after they were dealing with all this, and they were saying, hey, we need to clean up before the Derby. Everybody, take a listen to what he had to say.
We did not suffer any serious injuries or loss of life as a result of this flood. And that's thanks to the amazing flood protection system that we have built up over the last several decades. It worked. Our levees worked. We installed flood walls, and those worked. Our pumping stations worked. And so those investments that we have made really did pay off. They saved lives.
It saved lives. And now, Phil, when we look at this, all these numbers showing you that this was beyond Kentucky, but for them in Louisville, at least they had a major event. We know the Kentucky Derby just came through. How important is it to have a major event like that to infuse some money back into the local economy?
Well, I definitely think they should be congratulated. And the way the Kentucky Derby ran, it not only was a great event for America, but it showed hope the way that we can come back, and get through these storms. And it should be a lesson for the rest of the country, how to do this. And these events are so important, right? When you look at the Kentucky Derby, it's Americana. It brings in much needed revenue. And a lot of these businesses in these communities depend on this event, to get through the rest of the year. And of course, though, it was a great race too, with all the rain and the muddy track. Yeah. Though I'm absolutely convinced my horse Co-Leader would have won if we had a dry track, but it didn't work out that way. So I'm very upset.
Yeah, that's why we do the risk of weather impact, Phil. We have the Rowie because, just like athletes, the horses themselves, some of them like it dry, others like that sloppy track and take advantage of it. Either way, it's important to know that whether you're betting on it or just you're seeing the economic toll, weather does impact your wallet. It's great to have you on the show. Senior market analyst at Price Future Group and Fox Business Contributor Phil Flynn, thank you for being with us.
Thanks, Steve.